front of you our change of plea from not guilty to guilty.
Jake Haro, the father of missing 7-month-old baby Emmanuel, who is presumed dead, has just pleaded guilty. Why do this now? What does it mean for the continuing criminal case against Emmanuel's mother, Rebecca, and what a newly amended criminal complaint may tell us? We're going to discuss it all with celebrity criminal defense attorney Bradford Cohen. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Hey, real quick, everybody, this is another Law&Crime legal alert. There are allegations right now claiming that online apps like DraftKings and ESPN Bet and BetMGM and Bet365 and Fanatics Sportsbook and Caesars Sportsbook, that they are engineered for addiction. These multi-billion-dollar companies allegedly continue to put profit over safety. Every small payout, free bet, boosted parlay, that can trigger a dopamine rush that creates dependency and a destructive habit. They can keep users hooked and trap people in a cycle that can lead to serious financial loss. Well, I'll tell you what, our legal sponsors, they are taking on the online gambling industry to seek justice and potential compensation. So if you or a loved one has struggled with addiction, financial hardship, mental health issues due to sports betting apps, then visit gamblinglawsuits.com/sidebar to take a short quiz and check your eligibility to file a claim. We have got a major legal development to talk about in the tragic, awful case of Emmanuel Haro, the 7-month-old boy whose death captured the nation only a few months ago. Now, you might remember this when Emmanuel was reported missing on August 14th out in Cabazon, California, when the boy's mother, Rebecca Haro, claimed she was standing outside of her car in a Big 5 parking lot. This was out in Yucaipa, changing Emmanuel's diaper when someone physically attacked her, knocked her out. She wakes, her son was gone. Remember, that was the narrative. And the search was intense, okay? This was a massive search. This story made national attention. Deputies, K-9 units from San Bernardino and Riverside counties, they responded. Local Sheriff's Specialized Investigations Division responded. Rebecca and Emmanuel's father, Jake Haro, they begged the public for help. The Haro parents, they spoke to CNN's affiliate, KCAL and KCBS, with Rebecca saying, "I took him out of the car seat and I laid him on the chair and I had his diapers right here and someone said, 'Hola,' and I couldn't even turn, and that was just, I don't remember nothing." Jake told CNN affiliate KABC he was a healthy baby. He was crawling, he was kicking, he was playing with his toys. "Whoever took our son, please give him back." Okay? Here's the problem. After interviewing Rebecca and Jake, Rebecca was apparently confronted with inconsistencies in her initial account of what happened, and that is when they reportedly stopped cooperating with authorities. And by the way, I should mention, Jake was previously convicted of felony willful child endangerment in 2023 for abusing a baby girl in 2018. According to authorities, she had a skull fracture, rib fractures, brain hemorrhage, swelling in the neck, tibia fracture. And by the way, this is after Jake originally told police in that case that he just accidentally dropped the girl while giving her a bath. And when Jake and Rebecca were being investigated for Emmanuel's disappearance, authorities removed a 2-year-old child from their home. So what happens here? What happens with baby Emmanuel? Well, authorities, they searched the parents' home. And on August 22nd, San Bernardino County Sheriff's homicide detectives arrest Jake and Rebecca. They were charged with murder and filing a false police report. And to be clear, and this is one of the most chilling aspects of this entire story, little Emmanuel's remains have not been found. In August, I will tell you, officials, they claimed they had a, quote, pretty strong indication on where his remains were, and they did indicate that baby Emmanuel was severely abused over a period of time, but again, there's so much that we don't know, right? Well, Riverside County District Attorney Michael Hestron in August said, "The filing in this case reflects our belief that baby Emmanuel was abused over time and that eventually, because of that abuse, he succumbed to those injuries." But now we got to talk about the big news. And the big news is Jake Haro has just pleaded guilty. And there is now an amended complaint that Rebecca still faces. Okay, so for all this and more, because certainly there is a lot to break down from the legal perspective, I want to bring on a friend of the show. We love seeing him, somebody who knows a thing or two about high-profile cases, celebrity criminal defense attorney Bradford Cohen with us in studio.
Thank you
Bradford,
so much.
Good to see you. Thanks so much for taking the time. I got to start with this big news.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jake Haro, the father here, pleads guilty to second-degree murder filing a false report, and also assault of a child under 8 years old, which he also was facing. Apparently appeared in court yesterday. He officially changed his plea to guilty. This is all according to the Riverside County DA's office. My question is, why do it, and why do it now? Everybody I spoke to about this case is like, it feels so early to do it when you don't know all the evidence against him.
Yeah, it is a little early. Whenever I look at these cases, I always think that, generally speaking, pleas don't come until after you see the evidence, after you see what they have. Now, in a case like this, because it's high profile, they might have given a lot to the defense and said, like, listen, if you want to go through with a preliminary hearing, you want us to put on a show, you want us to do all that, then we're looking at XYZ. But if you do it now, we're going to give you the deal of the century, we're going to give you second degree, and we can show that, the judge is going to sentence you to this. We'll agree to this. I think that's probably where they went. And again, it's very early, but don't forget, I don't think these people are people of great means. And I think that they also weigh that into consideration when you're looking at a defense, you're looking at expert witnesses, you're looking at a long time. They're not getting, a bond tomorrow that they can afford, if at all. And so they're going to be in there for 2 years, 3 years, waiting a trial. So it might be that, or it might be that the guilt of what actually happened weighed on them. And I'm not saying that it doesn't happen. It's unusual, but it does happen.
Some would say, okay, wait a minute. If you have a case where there's no body and that a body would help prosecutors explain what happened, when it happened, you do the testing. If you don't have a body, it doesn't mean that someone can't be charged. It doesn't mean someone can't be found guilty, but it does provide a difficulty for prosecutors. It provides more of an avenue for defense attorneys. Maybe that's more so if you're dealing with an adult victim. You could say maybe they ran away, something happened. It's much more difficult when you're dealing with a baby like this. But again, going back to the aspect, do you think defense attorneys would say this was premature? There might have been arguments we could have made to suggest he's not guilty if we don't know where the body is.
Yeah, of course. We don't know all the evidence that's here, right? So, we won't know everything that they have. The key here is if you don't have a body, but you're saying all the damage that was done throughout the past year or two succumbed to these injuries, and this is what happened. You're giving the idea that you know how this murder occurred. I don't know if they have that evidence, but if you don't have the body, it's tough to say, okay, this is how the murder occurred. It was because he was beaten from when he was, 1 year old till now, and all of those injuries led to his death. It's a tough sell if you don't have the body to show the different injuries that led to his death.
And this kidnapping story wasn't working.
No, the kidnapping story wasn't working. So, when you have these kind of, you have stories that aren't working, and they know that. Yep. I'm sure they have cell phone data. I'm sure they have texts between them. In this day and age, I always say it's like the hardest time to commit any kind of crime is now.
Is now, yeah.
And it's not not just because of phones and things of that nature, but because people actually put stuff on social media that leads to their arrest, that lead to evidence. And I represent a lot of entertainers. There's rap songs that they sing about, and all of a sudden, that rap song leads to their arrest. Yeah. So there's a lot going on with those kind of technologies that I think led to this plea.
Let me tell you something that I'm suspecting might have happened here. It was reported by News Nation that there was a Perkins operation here. So Perkins operation that Jake had admitted in jail that he killed his son and threw him in the trash. Perkins operation, officer or an informant poses as an inmate. And the LA Daily News has reported that there was this new court record that revealed Rebecca's attorney, Jeff Moore, objected to a non-disclosure order regarding a Perkins operation, seemingly confirming that might have happened. If he admitted to an inmate that he did this, maybe that's what led to this. And he's like, there's only... But because you can also say, if this is true, or you admitted to an undercover officer, you admitted to an inmate, thinking they were an inmate, is it credible or is it not?
Right. So we've had cases where there's either jailhouse snitches or other inmates that are listening to what's going on, and then they're trying to save their, sentences. There's a lot to attack there, especially if they sent like an undercover agent in, or that individual was someone that they said, hey, listen, we're going to put you in a cell with him to get him to talk. because you run into Fifth Amendment privileges. Don't forget, like, just because you're not a cop, but if a cop is sending you in to get a confession, it's still just like a cop did it. You know, they're going to relate. So we don't know all that has gone on about that. I'm sure that if that happened, it would also lead to a plea because they're like, okay, we looked at it and this is, okay, he gave an admission. That's never good. But it doesn't mean the case is over. Like, I've had cases where we had jailhouse snitches where we can show, you know, the guy has snitched on 4 guys and one of them wasn't true, or he's got a problem with his own case. He wants to get out early. There's always motivations there. So it doesn't mean the case is over. But in this case, obviously, he took a plea. I don't know if that was a motivating factor.
There was something else I considered is, did they offer a deal and where he will lead them to this baby's remains? The reason I say that is early on in August, there were photos that came out of him in jail garb leading investigators into this dusty field. But again, no remains were found. I don't know the circumstances, how that happened. But is this a possibility that he does know where the remains are, and in exchange, that's important, right?
Right.
It's important, A, for Rebecca's case, which we'll talk about, but B, a sense of closure, a sense of answers, knowing what happened to this boy. You think that could be a possibility too?
It's always a possibility in these cases. Whenever there's a missing body, it always becomes part of kind of the plea that the state attorney's office is offering. Right. And it usually is the family who's pushing for that. You know, the family usually understands, any family, and not all families do this, because some families are like, as long as this guy is going to the death chamber or he's going to spend his life in prison, it is what it is. But some families, they want the remains back. They want to know what happened. And if that individual is willing to tell them what happened or let them know where the body is, that sometimes lowers their exposure, and they might get a second degree. They might get, instead of life without parole, 25 to life with a chance of parole after 25. So that usually does play a factor in it. Every time a victim's family says something to a state attorney, usually that weighs heavily on their decision.
A lot of people say, okay, he's pleading guilty, he's going to be testifying against Rebecca. You think that's what's happening?
I think it's definitely a possibility. I mean, usually that happens. You know, if you get 2 co-defendants, one of them is taking a plea, one of them isn't, usually as part and parcel of their plea, it's either a proffer, so you take that chess piece off the board. So, let's say 2 people are in a car and there's drugs found in it. You might not want the driver who's pleading guilty to say, oh, that guy did it, or maybe he's not even willing to say that guy did it. But you want the driver to say, those drugs weren't mine, so there's only 2 people in the car. I don't want to say who they were, but they weren't mine. So you take that chess piece off the table, so the defense can't say, oh, it's this guy's and blah, 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 and we're going to put him on the stand. He's going to testify for us that it's his because he's already taken a plea. So it's one of those 2 things. It's either yes, he may testify against her, or no, he might not testify against her, but you take that chess piece off the table so that the defense can't use him as a witness.
By the way, legal point of view, even if he's not called as a witness in her trial, would a jury in her trial, assuming they know nothing about this case, would they learn during the course of that trial that Jake pled guilty?
So it's very interesting. Usually no, because it affects the other co-defendant's case. Right. That this guy already pled. It's almost like it's almost like 404B, right? It's almost like bad evidence. It's like, oh, there's a bad act evidence here, but that's really not proper. There are ways that it comes in. If he's a witness and he says, like, yeah, I took a plea, obviously it's coming in, because then you say, like, okay, here's the bias that he has. He was looking at first degree, he got second degree, he's only going to serve 15 years and have a chance for parole. So all of those things come into play. So then, yes, they would find out about it. But normally, if he's not coming in, he's not testifying, no, it would be very unusual that it would come in.
By the way, I want to make another point about this. So the LA Daily News also is reporting that Jake Haro, also pleaded guilty to this unrelated charge that had been filed in Banning in 2024. It's being a felon or addict in possession of a firearm. He also acknowledged that he violated probation. But I do want to say this, Bradford. This is a guy who did a jailhouse interview with the Southern California News Group, said that he would tell his son, so Baby Emmanuel, I love you, buddy, that he wouldn't really talk about his role in his son's disappearance. Maybe he was trying to protect his defense. But he also did that media interview. He did, when his son was missing. Whoever has him, we're begging him to turn back. There's something about these kinds of cases that, you know, you think about who would you even want on a jury? Who would be sympathetic to a case like this? Because at the end of the day, it really is just incredibly distressing and frustrating to think about this. He says one thing and now is admitting what he really did.
Yeah, those cases are very hard. Usually on these type of cases, you want people that are not fans of the government, right? That believe in conspiracy theories. They're not fans of the government. They think that the police have their own agenda, things of that nature. And how do you get to that? Like I always say, oh, do you have any bumper stickers on your car? You know, I ask the off kilter questions because I'm really trying to figure out like where their head's at. What books have you read? You know, I ask questions to kind of find out about the individual to see if they question authority, as opposed to, oh, if a cop made an arrest, then the guy must be guilty. And there's people out there that believe that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I always find that questioning interesting because at first glance you're like, what is this about? And then you realize later on. So let's talk about what we can expect at sentencing here. It's scheduled for November 3rd. Faces, our understanding, 25 years to life. This is according to the DA's office of Riverside. What can we expect there?
I think he gets 25 years to life. Yeah, I think he's probably available for a parole after 25 years, and that's up to a parole board. A lot of states don't have that parole anymore, but a couple do. And after 25 years, he could be released. The likelihood is probably not, but you never know in a case like this where he's assisting. If he actually testifies, if he does certain things, he's admitted to his role in it. If he also shows where the body's buried, all those things come into play when a parole board is looking at possibility of parole.
You think we'll hear from him? You think he'll provide some sort of statement about what happened?
You know, the first statement that he gave, I wouldn't advise to give him that first statement, you know, to say like, hey, I just want my son back. Yeah. I would have never advised to do that, especially if you're a suspect. Like, it's just kind of idiotic.
Well, at that point, I don't think he was officially.
No,
people started having questions. They had questions about the story, and we're like, does that add up? But no one actually came out and said, oh, he's a suspect. He's being. But even so, he probably.
Yeah, the police were probably already identifying him as a subject, or identifying that the story was not what the story was. Right. And I think that in any cases where there's a kidnapping, I think, in my experience, most officers approach that with that the story is BS. Unfortunately, because they've seen a lot of it, and they start right away. When they're talking to you or talking to your fiance or wife or whoever it is, and it's a kidnapping, they're automatically trying to figure out, like, is this guy telling me the truth or not? And that's just a good detective's reflex. And most can get the sense of if this person's telling me the truth or not within the first 10 minutes. If they're really good detectives,
right? And
they'll be like, okay, something doesn't add up here. I can't put my finger on it, but I think that this is not legit.
I want to talk about Rebecca for a second. So she's pleaded not guilty. She apparently still remains in custody. So her case is continuing. She has a preliminary hearing set for November 3rd, so the same day as his sentencing. First of all, is that strange to do it like that?
Yes.
Okay.
It's very strange.
Anything going on there?
I don't think so, but it could be that they're going to use him at the preliminary hearing, so they want his plea to be in and him give whatever proffer he's going to give, and then use them at the preliminary hearing to say, yeah, she's the one who did it.
And what is a preliminary hearing? Explain what it is.
So it's a mini trial, preliminary hearings, and not every state has preliminary hearings. The states that do have preliminary hearings, it's like a mini trial. So California is really one of the big states that usually is very big on preliminary hearings. That's because they don't have depositions. So you get a lot of information in that preliminary hearing. That murder case that I had out in California, we had, I don't know, 6 or 7 day preliminary hearing where people were coming in and giving us evidence and giving us their testimony and how they came about things. And it's your time to question them and kind of start poking some holes in the state's case. Now, what's unusual about a preliminary hearing is you don't want to put all your cards out there, right? So you don't want to cross-examine a guy, like just start slapping him around, because you save that for trial.
Yeah.
So really a preliminary hearing is a chance to gather information. Most of the time they find probable cause, and that's what that is for.
Standard.
It's a very low standard. But you get a lot of information at that preliminary hearing that you might not be able to get in some states that don't have depositions.
So in other words, let's expect this case to continue after the preliminary hearing, because there's going to be enough evidence to move forward.
Yeah.
But we get a sense of what they have at this point. And I want to talk about the case against Rebecca Haro because, okay, so she's pleaded not guilty. to murder and that filing a false police report. She remains in custody. So let me get into this amended complaint that was filed yesterday on the day that Jake pleaded guilty. Now, it lists out count 1, how Jake and Rebecca, on or about August 5th, 2025, through and including August 14th, 2025, in the county of Riverside, state of California, the defendants did willfully and unlawfully murder, and then they talk about Baby Emmanuel. Count 2, defendants did willfully and unlawfully report to a police officer, deputy sheriff, and member of the California Highway Patrol that a felony and misdemeanor has been committed, knowing that report to be false. And count 3 was all about Jake, only that Jake, quote, having the care and custody of baby Doe, a child under 8 years of age, did willfully and unlawfully assault said child by means of force that to a reasonable person would be likely to produce great bodily injury, resulting in the death of said child. Now, those are the charges, but now I want to highlight something else, the aggravating factors that are laid out here. Number 1, and it is further alleged that the offense was carried out with planning, sophistication, and professionalism. There's also this. It is further alleged the victim, baby Doe, E.H., Emmanuel Haro, was particularly vulnerable. It is further alleged the defendant, Rebecca Renee Haro, took advantage of a position of trust and confidence to commit the crime. How about this? It's further alleged the defendant, Jake Mitchell Haro, prior performance while on probation, mandatory supervision, post-release community supervision, and parole, to wit, was unsatisfactory. We could put that one to the side since this case is resolved, but you think about the aggravating factors facing her.
Right.
Why list that out? Why is that important?
Because in California, you list out the aggravating factors, like the same thing that we had in that murder case that we had out in California. You list out the aggravating factors so that it contributes to the murder case and it contributes to the degree of murder. You know, they could just charge it as just a murder case, right? They don't have to put first, second, or third, you know, manslaughter. They don't have to put that in. So those aggravators are what pushes it to a first degree, because there was planning involved and things of that nature.
It does give you an idea of they have a better theory of the crime, right?
It does. And the thing is that probably from a proffer from the husband who already pled, and if things go the way that I think they're going to go, obviously the defense is going to say, hey, this is the guy who's on probation. This is the guy who's dirty. This is the guy who assaulted him all these years. Yes, I've watched it. I should have done a better job as a mom because I knew about it, but I was afraid of him too. I think that's where defense. That's what I think. Yeah.
Okay. Is that successful ever?
It's a tough one to sell because moms, if you have moms, we go back to who you put on your jury. If you have a mom on a jury, I know my wife would go nuts. Sure. If something happened to our son. So it's the same kind of feeling that moms would have. A normal mom on a jury would be like, hey, she was watching it. They won't be able to relate to, even if she was scared of the husband, to not do anything at all, to not take the kid away, to not take the kid someplace else. I think it's a hard sell, but it's not impossible. So I think that's where the defense goes, is that this guy's a scary guy. This is the guy who, she actually got beaten too. Like, I think that's where they have to go with it, because there's nowhere else to go.
The problem for her is if she tells this story and she were to take the stand and explain the story, she's the same person that did her own media interview and said she got got knocked out and someone took her child. It's like, if she can make that lie,
right,
alleged lie, right, and then come on the stand and say, no, this is really what happened. It's like, why should the jury believe what you're saying now?
And that's why Casey Anthony didn't take the stand, right?
Right.
So Casey Anthony didn't take, because there were so many stories that if you took the stand, which one is the true one?
Yeah.
So that's the problem when you have individuals that have already put their story out or already talked to the police. Now, all of a sudden, you get all the discovery and you're like, wait a minute, this is a better defense, this road. But you've already gone down this road. It makes the job a lot harder.
I have a criminal justice question that I wanted to end on with. That there's a lot of frustrating aspects about this case. There's a lot of tragic aspects about this case, but frustrating for a second. So the Riverside County DA, Mr. Hestrom, criticized how Jake Haro had this previous 2023 case, right, that I mentioned before, how it was handled. That, quote, as an experienced child abuser, remember he was convicted of abusing that girl, that Jake, quote, should have gone to prison, and called the judge's decision to sentence him to just probation, quote, an outrageous error in judgment. Quote, if that judge had done his job as he should have done, Emmanuel would be alive today. You think that's right?
I think it's a very tough situation when you start blaming, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, what a judge did in a vacuum at that point, or what they knew or what they didn't know. Now, I don't know all what they knew at that time of sentencing. I don't know if the state attorney went along with the probation or objected to the probation, or if he did something else and that's why he got probation, did a program or whatever it is. And we always sit here after the fact, and it's very easy to sit here after the fact saying, hey, if this one judge didn't let him out on a driving while license suspended, he wouldn't have gotten a DUI today. And, it's very difficult. But knowing just from what he's saying, it does seem unusual that he got straight probation on a case where he was a known child abuser. It seems unusual that he would get straight probation. I can tell you that.
It's not like he was picked up for tax evasion,
Right.
and then you're like, oh, he commits murder.
Right.
If he abused a young child in his care, and now he just pled guilty to not only abusing that another child and killing that child, murdering that child, you can see why people are like, this was what we talk about in law, foreseeable.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the problem.
And it is a problem. And, it gets easier, I think, to kind of play Monday morning quarterback where someone has 10 felony priors.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden the 11th one is just as bad as the prior 10, and the judge kept giving him probation. It's really easy to say, okay, that judge really made a bad choice there. I think it's more difficult without knowing all of the facts. It does seem, just from looking at it, without knowing the facts, that probation wasn't appropriate at that time. But again, these judges make these calls, and it goes the other way too. Sometimes I get a case where I'm like, God, the judge lit this guy up for no reason, and gave him 2 years or 3 years. Where I'm in my mind, I'm like, this is a probation case. Yeah. So it happens on both ends of the spectrum. The thing is, when you get more time, it doesn't really matter because the guy's in prison.
Yep, that's a good point. Bradford Cohen, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. Thanks for coming in.
It's always good to see you.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. You can follow me on X or Instagram. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.